everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Brittany of BrittanyJJones.com, and in today's video I am continuing on with my September collaboration with TÉLIO fabrics. And in today's video we are going to be sewing Mccalls 7575 UB. I love classic button-up shirts. I don't have many that I've made, so I'm really excited to add this one here to my closet. The fabric that I'm going to be using is this really pretty white with black stripe kind of window pane. It's a Chloe check fabric from TÉLIO, and I absolutely love it. So if you are ready to whip up a button-up shirt with me, go ahead and cut out all of your pattern pieces, transfer all your markings, and let's get started. Okay everybody, so to get started working on our button-up top, the first thing we need to do is to stitch our darts in place. So first we're going to do these bust darts, and then we're going to come and do these fisheye darts in the center. So go ahead and grab some pins, and I'm going to pin here at my point and just go ahead and pin out my dart. Okay, so once you have this one pinned, go ahead and pin the other one, and then sew these down first and press them down. I'm going to begin at the wide end of the dart and then sew down to the point. I'm going to back stitch only at the beginning but not at the end. I'm going to tie a knot at the end of the dart. Now I'm going to tie a knot with these threads. I'm going to go ahead and stitch the other dart the same way. Once you have these bust darts sewn in place and pressed down, go ahead and pin these fisheye darts in place like I have here. Now to sew these, you want to start in the center and work your way to the end, and then leave loose threads so you can tie a knot, and then go back to the center and then go to the other end and then tie a knot to secure your darts in place. So again, don't just start at one end and sew to the other. Start in the center, sew to one side, tie a knot, then start in the center and go to the other side and tie a knot. Go ahead and do that for both of your darts now. Okay, so now I have both of my darts sewn in place. This bust dart right here is pressed down, and this fisheye dart is pressed toward the center. So now that you have your darts sewn, you go ahead and set that to the side. If you're going to be doing pockets, you can move on to those steps. I don't have pockets on mine, so I'm going to move right to the back piece. And for the back piece number 2, we are going to stitch our darts in place on the back piece the same exact way we did the front. So I'm going to go ahead and pin these out. Then I'm going to start at the center sewing, going to one end, tying in a knot, start in the center, go in the other end, and then tie that in the knot the same exact way. Okay, so once you have the darts on your back sewn and pressed toward the center, then we're going to go ahead and grab our yoke piece. You should have cut out 2. One will be interfaced, the other will not. The one that is interfaced, you want to put it right sides facing to your back piece, matching up your notches, and go ahead and pin in place. So now you can take it to your machine and go ahead and baste this in place. Okay, once you have it basted in place, it should look a little something like this. So the next step, we're going to take our other yoke piece, which is going to be our facing piece. And what you want to do is you want to put the right side of the facing to the wrong side of your shirt. So you can see here, this is my seam, this is the wrong side of my shirt, but I'm going to take the right side of my facing and I'm going to pin here right at the seam, matching up those notches. So go ahead and match your notches, grab your pins, and then we can pin this in place. Once you have it pinned, go ahead and take it to your sewing machine. Now you're going to stitch following along your basting stitch at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, from here now I'm going to go ahead, I still have, this is the yoke facing on the inside, this is the yoke facing that's been interfaced. I'm going to trim down my seam just a little bit here. Now I'm going to take it to my ironing board. I'm just going to press up both of the facing pieces just to make sure I have a nice flat seam. Okay, so now that I have the yokes pressed up, everything is nice and flat, and then again I trimmed away some of the excess. Now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to flip the facing down so that it's out of the way. So now I only have the interface yoke up. I'm going to take the fronts of my top and I'm going to line them up at the shoulder seams. So right up here, I'm going to match up my notches and pin the shoulders in place. Once you have the shoulder seam pinned, go ahead and take it to the machine and sew them in place. So now that I have the shoulder seams sewn, the next step I'm gonna do is to attach this facing piece, but I'm gonna do it a little different from the instructions. I'm gonna do the burrito method. So from here, what I'm gonna do, like I said, is the burrito method, and I have the right side of the yoke facing up looking at me, but again, this is the wrong side of the shirt, right side of the facing, and I'm just gonna start rolling the entire shirt up like a burrito. And then once you keep rolling, you will see your shoulder seams. So what you want to do is match up your notches and then pin in place. So let me grab my pins. Make sure you're only at the seam allowance. You don't have any of your top in the way. And I'm just going to pin in place. Do the same thing to the other side. Okay, so now take it to the sewing machine. You can stitch down only on this seam allowance. Do not sew any of this shirt, just the seam allowance only. If you want, you can follow along the previous stitch from when you stitched the shoulder seams to the yoke facing that's interfaced. So go ahead and take it to your machine and do that now. So sewing on a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm just going to follow along with the previous stitch, back stitching at the beginning and end. Alright, so we're back. Now before we start trimming off seam allowances, I always like to just make sure that I did not sew any of my shirts. So just gently start to undo your shirt here. Be careful around the neck area, and like I said, just gently start to pull it out just a little bit. You just want to make sure that you didn't sew. Okay, so I didn't sew any extra parts, so now I can go ahead and flip that back out and trim this side off, and then I'll check the other side the same way. Alright, so once you have everything turned out, go ahead and give your shoulder seam a really good press, and your shirt should look a little something like this. Your yoke should be completely finished and nicely done on the inside and outside. And now we're going to do some basting stitches to baste the sides of the yoke and around the neck edge of the yoke together now. So go ahead and do some basting stitching now, and then we'll move on to the next step. Alright, so once you have the basting stitch in, I also went ahead and stitched in my label only to the yoke facing part. It's not through on the back, so I did it only to the front, well, only to the inside. The next step is with right sides together. We're going to go ahead and sew our sides together. So go ahead and put your right sides together and then pin them in place. Okay, once you have both sides pinned together like I have here, now we can go ahead and sew them. Okay, so once your side seams have been sewn, you want to go ahead and finish off those edges and then give it a good press. Then you want to go ahead and press up your narrow hem. I went ahead and I pressed up mine, and now I'm going to take it to the machine. I'm just going to stitch really close to the fold. Alright, so once the hem is in place, now I'm going to sit my top to the side, and now I'm going to start working on the sleeve. Okay, so once you have your sleeve piece 9 and 10, first you want to do some ease stitching from small circle to small circle at the top of your sleeve on piece 9. So go ahead and do that at the machine. And then once you have that done, then you want to put right sides together with these pieces and sew them together at the side. But first, let's just do the ease stitching. Okay, so after you have the ease stitching at the top of your sleeve, go ahead and pin your sleeves right sides together right here like I have here, and then you're going to stitch down this seam and finish it. And then I'm also going to finish off the edges of these sleeves right here, because if you look ahead, you will see that we will have to clip in and kind of fold under, do a little fold under here on our sleeves around step 36 and 37. So I'm going to go ahead and just finish off these edges, so at least these will be neat when the whole sleeve is done. Okay everybody, so I have my sleeves sewn, but I realized that I sewed them completely the wrong way. I was not supposed to stitch this seam. I was supposed to stitch this seam together, which would be the underarm seam of the sleeve. This is what I was supposed to do, but I sewed this sleeve instead. So to fix it, I had to take out my serger finish, and I have opened it up, and down here at the bottom I unpicked the seam. So right here I am just going to, first I'm going to finish these edges separately, and then I'm going to stitch up the side of them and across and then down, and then I'm going to create the pleat in the sleeve, and then I will move on to stitching this seam down and then starting the cuff. So I'm going to do all those steps right now. Okay, y'all, so this is where I am so far, and please keep in mind that I sewed my sleeve wrong, so yours should not look like this. Your seam should be sewn here at the underarm seam, and this seam should be opened. But because I did mine wrong and I kind of looked ahead on the pattern, I saw that if I just kind of unpicked this to here and sewed this up and did the pleat, then I would be, I'll still be good. So that's what I did. Let me show you the inside. I went ahead and I serged down the edges, opened them up flat, and I just stitched this down on the side here, right at that large notch. I'm sorry, the large circle that was there, sewed it around, squared it off right there, and then I just basted the pleat over. So from here, I'm going to stitch the underarm seam together because I need to get ready to do the cuff at the bottom, and I need this seam closed. So I'm gonna go ahead and stitch down my underarm seam now, and then I'll move to the cuff. Okay, y'all, so this seam on yours should still be open. The only seam that should be sewn is the underarm seam. So right now I have my cuffs that have been interfaced, and I'm gonna press up 5/8 of an inch on the unnotched edge. Okay, now that I have that pressed up, I'm gonna go ahead and trim this to within 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm just gonna trim off a little bit of this that I pressed up. From here, we're going to fold our cuff along the fold line, like so, and then you're going to pin and sew the ends together. Same thing to this one, fold it along the fold line, right sides together. Okay, and now take it to the machine and sew the sides down now. Okay, so now I'm going to trim this down here on the side. Take a little bit. Okay, and from here, go ahead and flip them out. Grab a point turner if you have one. Poke your corners out gently, don't be too rough with them. Same thing to the other cuff. Now you want to go ahead, take it to your ironing board and give it a good press. Okay, once you have your cuffs pressed out, go ahead and grab your sleeve, and I'm going to turn mine right side out. And so from here, I'm going to find my notch and right sides together. Wait, it doesn't go to that one, it goes to this one. Right sides together, I'm going to match up the side here, match up the notch, and pin the cuff all the way around in place. Making sure not to pin the whole cuff, just the part that has the notch, not the one that's folded under. Okay, so once you have your cuffs pinned, go ahead and stitch them in a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then trim them to 1/4 of an inch seam. So let's go ahead and sew, and then we'll trim. Okay, from here, once you have your cuff sewn on, go ahead and trim it, and then you want to flip that seam toward the bottom. Go ahead and press it down, and then your cuff will go over it like this. And then you can either slip stitch it or do top stitching all the way around the cuff. I'm gonna do some top stitching around mine. So you go ahead and slip stitch or top stitch yours now, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, once you have your cuffs sewn in place, I have mine sewn here. Now you want to go ahead and finish up this seam right here, and then you also want to fold this in and hand stitch or top stitch it. I top stitched mine, and then once you're done with that, you can go ahead and sew on your button and your buttonhole to your cuff. I'm going to do all of my buttons and buttonholes at the end, so I'm not going to worry about that right now. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my top and go ahead and pin my sleeves in place. Once you have the sleeves pinned, go ahead and take it to the machine and sew it in place. Alright, once we have our sleeves, both of them sewn on, then we can set this to the side and go ahead and grab our front placket pieces. You want to go ahead and press up 5/8 of an inch on the unnotched edge. Okay, once you have it trimmed, now on the lower, at the lower end of the placket, you'll know you're at the lower because the notch will be up at the top. You want to fold along the fold line, and I put a little notch in mine so I know where it was. So just fold it back like this, and then you're gonna stitch just right across here. So again, you're just gonna fold over along the fold line right at the bottom of the placket. Make sure that you're not at the top where the notch is. So on the bottom, just go ahead and fold it over onto itself. Okay, so now that I have the placket fronts, they are sewn and turned right side out, and I pressed them. Now I can go ahead and grab our top, find your notches, line them up, and then pin it in place. Once you have them both pinned in place, go ahead and sew it in a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have the placket sewn on, go ahead and give it a good press. Press your seam toward the front and then flip your placket to the inside. Okay, so once you have it pressed, you go ahead and fold it over, and you can top stitch or slip stitch it closed on the inside, is your choice. I'm gonna do a top stitch on the outside of mine, so go ahead and do that to your placket now. All right, so once you have your placket sewn on, go ahead and give everything a really good press. And now we can move on to the next step, which is to work on our collar. First thing first, you want to go ahead and stay stitch your neck edge. So go ahead and do that now. Okay, once you have your stay stitching done around your neckline of your shirt, go ahead and set that to the side and we'll start working on our collar piece. You should have cut out 2 collar pieces and 1 interfacing. This one I've already applied the interfacing to. So with right sides together, you go ahead and lay your collar pieces together, and then we're going to pin around the sides and then the bottom edge, making sure that you keep the notched edge open. So this edge is notched, so I'm not going to pin there, just going to pin all the way around the outer edge. Okay, now you can take it to the sewing machine and you can stitch along this outer edge right here, and then we're going to trim our seams. Once you have it sewn and you've trimmed, you want to go ahead and flip it right sides out. Get you a point turner and kind of gently point out your corners. Once you have the corners pointed out, you want to go ahead and take it to your ironing board and press it, and then take it to your machine and do a basting stitch to hold the notched edges together. So go ahead and press it and then take it to your machine and put a basting stitch in on this side. Okay, so now I have my collar basted together, and I'm going to take the uninterfaced side of my collar band and I'm going to place it right sides together with the interfaced side of my collar. So this side is interfaced, and I'm going to put it right sides facing here, matching up the notches. Now that you have that pinned, then you want to go ahead and grab your interface collar band, and then you're going to press up 5/8 of an inch on the notched edge. Both edges are notched. This one has a double notch, this one has a single notch at the bottom. So press up 5/8 of an inch on this one, and then once you have it pressed up, then you're going to trim it down to 3/8 of an inch. So let's go ahead and do that now. Once you have it pressed up and trimmed, then you want to pin this side of the collar band to your collar, and we're just going to match up our notches here and pin through all layers. So now, once you have it pinned, go ahead and take it to the sewing machine, and we're going to stitch all the way around this outer edge, and then we'll trim the seam. Okay, now that you have it all sewn and you went ahead and trimmed your seam, now we're going to flip it out, and I'm going to take it to the ironing board and give it a really good press. So let's go ahead and iron it down now. Okay, so once you have the collar pressed out and everything is nice and flat, go ahead and grab your shirt, and we are just going to start lining up notches and our markings and pin the collar to the neckline now. Okay, once you have it sewn, then you want to go ahead and trim down the seam allowance. So go ahead and grab your scissors and we'll trim that down now. Alright, once you have your seam trimmed down, then you just want to fold over that pressed edge of the collar band that we pressed up earlier, and then you can either slip stitch this down or you can edge stitch it all the way around. But first I am going to turn it this way so I can put pins in it. I want to pin it on the this side of it, the right side, because I'm going to stitch all the way around. All right, we are down to the last step. Once you have your collar band sewn in place, now all you have to do is put on your buttons and buttonholes, put it on your placket, and then put it on your cuff, and then you are all done with this top. Thank you all so much for joining me for this sew along. In today's video, we worked on Mccalls 7575 View B, and I used this beautiful fabric from TÉLIO. If you have any questions, leave them for me below. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Blessings, everyone. Bye.